Hi, I'm Basundhara. Don't worry, I'm finite.
Perfect. Welcome, Basundhara, to the podcast. It's been a long time coming here. We've been trying to put this together for quite a while. I'm excited to have you here. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's nice and warm here in Mumbai,
Oh yeah,
and yeah, all the way on the other side of the world. So,
yeah, yes. It's very cold here in Vermont, and you are a good 10.5 hours ahead of me. How was the
yeah,
day, by the way?
the day was great, very productive.
Oh, great. What did you do?
I went for my work. I'm a photographer, and I'm working on a UNESCO World Heritage Site right now, documenting the progress of restoration and new construction of the site. So, yeah, I went there for a while and then came back and did some stuff including uploading the pictures and then I'm also a photographer where I do personal branding and headshots for LinkedIn audience. So yeah, I've been following up with a couple of clients. Luckily, I had two inquiries today, right in the morning, the very first thing. So that's why the day went pretty well. So I've been doing all the arrangements so that I can do send a proposal to both the clients today. So
That sounds great. It
that's
sounds like a productive day. Although
it
I don't think I've ever
does.
heard a photographer say, I'm a blank photographer, and then stop talking. Every photographer I know says, well, I do this, and then I do this on the side, and then I'm also doing this as a freelance job because we all need so many different lanes of income.
Well, I'm a very budding photographer. It's not been long that I've been a photographer. I started my photography only 7 years ago when my first contract was on Holland America line, where I did photography as a part of the team and I sailed around the world. So before that, I was working as an HR, and I always wanted to use my camera as a part of my limbs, my body, where I don't have to think. I can just make adjustments without even thinking. And this was the best opportunity. I did photos every single day for 7 months. So that was an amazing thing. That's how I started my photography journey.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's how we connected was through ships. We both went through the photography gauntlet on board.
Yeah,
But I really like something you said that you wanted your camera to be another limb, an extension of yourself. Do you
yeah.
feel like that has that been something you wanted since you picked up a camera, or and how has that evolved? How do you feel about the camera as an extension of yourself now versus when you first started?
This is interesting because I'm an engineer and then I pursued my master's in human resource and I worked as a human resource professional for a while, and that's when I explored photography as a hobby, and it was very frustrating that I see so many good pictures and my pictures were so bad, so terrible. So I stopped looking at pictures of everybody and I started focusing on how to get better myself. So online training was good enough, but then it wasn't very fulfilling. So I did a proper training. I went to a school where I signed up for a course and learned the basics of photography, including the foundation, how it was made, and even production on films and developing films on a dark room.
Right.
And that's where I gained a lot of confidence on the details, intricate details of cameras and different lighting techniques. And then I was craving to get a job, and luckily I applied and got through this job working on cruise lines. So yeah, initially it was very difficult for me. The changing setting was difficult. I would just do an auto settings, and it felt like, what am I doing? I'm not a photographer if I'm setting the camera on auto and taking pictures. So then I started doing program mode, and then once I learned the setting from there, then would adjust that manually, learning from there. But that was very basic initially and it was still frustrating. But then yes, after the training I got huge confidence because at least I knew what I'm doing. I just needed to practice and get better at it. So yes, definitely now when I see the light, at least intuitively I'm very close to what I need. And especially in the site where I'm working right now, the lights are so contrasting. You have to shoot in the bright sunlight and really dark inside buildings, because there's an open site where there's a huge construction going on, and there are indoors where the offices are being redone.
Hmm.
So all of these settings I'm very I'm very happy to say that I'm able to do all of those instantly, to
Good. So
approximately good extent. Yeah.
I think there is a little bit of a it's a taboo in the photography world, you know, in the snobbery of the photography world to never shoot on auto. But I'd also think auto does a pretty good job when you have no time. If you're just trying to get that shot, if you need to just throw it on auto and get a shot, it's better to get the shot than to be able to say, I got the perfect settings, but I missed the shot. You know, that doesn't really go to what you were saying because I know how good it feels to be able to hold a camera in your hand and feel like I would like the depth of field to change. And you don't have to take your eye from the viewfinder. You just know which of your fingers makes that happen,
Oh
and it
yeah,
feels
yeah.
really good to just be able to go click, click, click. Okay, now it's exactly what I want. Having that extension of yourself must feel good. Like I know you're very humble and you are always learning, but do you feel that you can confidently describe yourself as a photographer now? It's been 7 years is a long time, I must say.
Yes, I think so. I mean, since I've been doing most of the part of my work was initially studio photography, where we worked on the lights on Holland America, and then I moved to Cunard, and that was one of the best experience, I would say, because we used to do a lot of outdoor shoots. We would take guests around the ship, and we had some specific locations which were like some beautiful spots where we can take pictures, but the ship is moving in one direction, and sometimes the sun is in a different direction. So every time you improvise using the same location, but then how to play with the lights, that gave me so much exposure and so much confidence, you know, at the same location, how to shoot when it is high key, when it is low key, when it is low light, when it's high light, when the sun is behind you or in front of you. We would usually shoot around the sunset time, which is like, ambient light, but still there's a lot of struggle that we had to go through when the direction of the ship is different, because the iconic funnel was there, and then there were some
Right.
yeah, there were some beautiful locations outside in the deck, and that gave me so much exposure working with natural light right out there. And then when I came back here and started working studio lights again, I started creating lighting in such a way that the eyes are highlighted, because most of the pictures that I did was headshots, and it's very important that when it is a close-up picture, the eyes catch all the attention. We make conversations through eyes, so the
Yep.
person who is viewing the picture of that person, the viewer should be able to connect with that picture through the eyes. So
Yep.
that helped me build up a lot of techniques, which is highlighting the eyes and concealing the rest of the face so that the attention stays here and not get distracted elsewhere. So I can say that I am much more confident than when I started, when I had no clue of the lighting. I was just going by like a McDonald's formula, making the same product over and over again, where I don't have to
Right.
think. And now I can
Yeah.
improvise when it depends, when there's a bald headed person or someone who has some scar, and how to conceal and make it more professional, and as if they find it confident as well when they see their pictures. And of course, their outdoor shoots really, really helped me to gain that kind of techniques and exposure to try out different things in those seven,
Yeah,
8 months.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of things you said that I wanted to highlight. You said like mentioning shooting the same place over and over again. On the ship, it was for consistency in marketing and the ease of I'm going to take the clients who want their engagement photos. We're going to take them here. We know the good spot,
Yeah.
but you're also working with changing lighting in that spot. So
Yeah.
I think between those two things, you really got a lot of experience, and it's something that you have recommended to me sometimes when you look at my work and you say, uh, have you thought about going back there at sunrise or sunset or after dark, shooting the same place in different lights, different seasons, and just different conditions can
Yeah.
really kind of hone your craft, not only from the technical side but from the
Creativity.
have
Yeah.
creativity of the eye of the composition and how a scene can give you a totally different feeling depending
Yeah.
on the time of day or the weather conditions. So is that something you've carried on from ships that you use now in your personal photography business?
It's all mixed up. It's just like a culmination of whatever I've learned so far. I just try to expand it as much as possible. So you learn, and then you expand your learning and your experiences based on whatever you've learned. So it's just
Yeah.
like constant learning process. And I've seen your pictures too. I mean, I'm a big fan of your pictures. No wonder.
Thank you.
So I've actually gone back to the end of your the starting of your pictures,
Oh, I'm
to the
sorry you had to see
very
that.
very end. No. And since then till now, the kind of progress you have with those images, and the composition, and of course colors, and I think a one contribution is because of the change in camera as well, because the camera technology has evolved. But your compositions, and every time you put a picture on your status, or you put a picture on your post, or you share just individually with me, the compositions are great.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you that I think everything we do as photographers is cumulative, and for better or worse, the fact that we're always with a camera on our phone, and we're all shooting. Many of us are shooting more often than we would have otherwise. I think you can still use that to hone your creativity and continue to work and learn while you're just shooting the most inane objects. You know, like if I'm taking a picture of a coffee, you can find an interesting way to shoot that cup. You can find an interesting way to shoot the person that is making it for you. You can
Yeah.
use the light, you can use the background. I always try to find a way to do that. I mean, I like taking photos of it from the memory, but it's also an exercise for me that while I'm documenting what's happening, I'm trying to make it interesting as well. So I think I'm trying to constantly learn, use the environment, and keep myself on my game. Talk to me about your progression through what you wanted to do when you were younger, how you ended up going from engineering to HR to photo. Like what led you here? Was there always something that made you interested in photography? Were you always interested in visual media?
Honestly, when I was growing up, I was not an artist. The only thing as an artist that really popped up in me was the drawings that we had to do, of the plants in biology.
Oh, okay, yes.
So my brother used to be a very, very, very good at sketching, and whenever I would make a good drawing, people would say, "Did you make your brother do that?" So that was my impression as an artist. But engineering was mostly, that was vision of my father. He wanted me and my brother to be an engineer. And at that point of time, coming from a very small town of India, at that stage, there was not much exposure. So I didn't really envision much. Whatever my father said, I just did. And in my first year of education, I didn't really perform very well. So I went back to my mom and said, "What am I doing? I'm not even doing well in this." And my mom said, "Go and ask your father, because it's his idea." So I went to my dad and I asked him that, why am I doing engineering? And he said that he started his career from a very small level where he struggles through where he is right now. So he wanted to uplift us to a stage where we don't have to struggle the way he did. So when he was working in a steel industry, um, in a steel plant, so all the engineers were the one who were respected and has the right kind of income and resources. So that's why he pushed us to a level where we can start our career in a good way. That's where, so I that idea stayed in my mind, that you have to do something where you can go up, you don't have to go back. So
Right.
that idea stayed in my mind. After my engineering, I like started with a small startup, developing some softwares. However, I didn't stay there for long, and mostly my work was related to management in that company. For some reason, people think that women are good at management. So I was not in the technical side, but I was mostly into the management and doing all sort of presentations and like giving demo to the clients. So mostly client facing and the management side. So I could not go back to the technology by the time I left the company. And if I had to, I had to do more trainings. So I just
Okay.
thought I'll stick to the management, and I did my post graduation in human resource, and I stayed in human resource until I actually fell for photography. and and that came because I bought my first phone camera, where I started taking pictures from the phone, and I
Wow, okay.
realized, wow, this is amazing. I can take good pictures. And eventually I went ahead and bought Canon 600D, which is similar to T3i that they sell in the US.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then I started doing photos and going to do a lot of street photography in Delhi. Delhi is beautiful for street photography. You go at any corner and get a nice shot. So that's where I started learning. And there are some beautiful monuments. And when you go to monuments, the symmetry in the composition was an amazing thing that really picked my attention. So I started getting inclined towards the sunset and sunrise pictures and the symmetry of all the architectural stuff, and the extremes of going on street photography where you find random things, patterns of fruits and vegetables and trees and
Sure.
leaves. So yeah, I
I
think
think
I answered more than what you asked, but
well, it's interesting to hear where you got the interest and how that grew. I think everybody starting in photography gravitates toward sunsets and sunrises, but I think what changes when you get better at photography is you turn away from the sunrise or the
yes.
sunset and you look at the things that the sun is hitting.
Yeah.
um, well, you've come a long way from when you started on ships, but now you're shooting headshots for personal clients, and you're basically giving them the view of themselves that they see, and you're trying to bring out that view of themselves. So, can you just tell me a little bit about how you access those ideas through your clients and how you change the way that you shoot based on what someone is trying to convey about themselves?
So this idea came to me when I was actually working on ships. Yeah, there used to be a product called Black Label, and that was very premium photography, but it was more intimate, where you capture the emotions of people. So the photographer will spend more time capturing the emotions of people individually and family and couples together. I always wanted to pursue that, to specialize more, and it was a big craving in me where I could do that, but I could not go through the training. I was enlisted to do the training with Joe Craig, of course, the whole thing. But because my visa didn't get approved and I could not do that, I had to learn it hard way myself. But this thought stayed in my mind that if I take a picture of a person, it should be their authentic emotions and expressions. And once when I was again sailing on the ship, a lady came to me. She was from Boston, but an Indian. But she said that, why don't you do headshots? You do good photos. I said, what is headshots? And she explained that their company hired a photographer, and each employee was to give $50, and they will get a headshot which would represent the organization consistently in the same way. So that idea stayed in my mind. And when I came back to India, I bought some equipments and I started doing pictures. But it always stayed in me that no matter my lighting was good or bad, because I really struggled initially to get the right kind of lighting, the expression was most important thing for me. And I was able to talk to people, concentrate on their expressions, because when someone faces the camera, they are so nervous, no matter who it is. It takes time for people to face a non-living object. We always communicate with people, but when a camera comes in front, we freeze. So I invest a lot of time with my clients, talking about things about their life and their stories, and so that their mind get distracted. And while they are get distracted and making a conversation, you cannot fake yourself when you're making a real conversation, or
Right,
talking
right.
passionately about yourself or your story or your family, your kids. So these are small elements that I mention when I do the photo shoot, so that their expressions are authentic, whether they want to portray themselves as someone who is a leader or someone who's passionate or someone who's a good listener. All of these expressions will come really naturally when they are making a conversation. I just ask them to look into the camera and talk. So somehow that trick works, and I'm able to get that authentic expression,
No,
which
this is something I wanted to clarify. Is it something that do you ask them different questions? Do you lead them down different lines of conversation if they're getting a headshot for a dating profile versus like a corporate shot?
well, the idea is to bring an expression which they want. So I do a lot of conversation with them, that what do they want to portray. And most of them are leaders, like the senior level professionals or mid level professionals. And since they have got a lot of experience, their pictures should portray that experience, that gravity, that wisdom. and
Right.
and to bring that, they need to talk in a certain way, or if they are approachable. So all of that should express in that photo. So yes, I do make a point to, so for instance, there was this client of mine, she came and she was very nervous, and I asked her that how did you become a lawyer, and she explained that she comes from a small village, but then she struggled her way through, and earlier her house was her office, but now she owns an office with like a lot of staff. And the moment she started talking about it, there was a shine in her eyes, and her body language and the posture is straightened up. So that whole conversation gave her a demeanor and the confidence and the shine in her eyes
Sure.
that it was incomparable. And after 10 minutes, when she realized that she shared one of the most, intimate detail about her, career and life, she kind of sheeped out. So like her
Wow.
expression after that just subsided, but in that moment I got what I wanted, that
That's perfect.
perfect image. Yeah.
This, this is just my mind working the way it always does with ideas. But when you were saying that, I thought, wow, it'd be a really interesting like video podcast to just video your portrait sessions and hear these people opening up about their lives as they're getting their portrait taken. I just love that idea. Um, but that's great. Yeah, I can imagine like somebody like that you convey what you feel, and if you're talking about the obstacles you overcame and the pride you have in your work, then you're going to show that outwardly. The same thing that I would do when I would shoot couples, I would have them talk about like, oh, where did you meet? Oh, and they're engaged, usually engaged, or they just got married. I would talk about how they met, and I would tell them to like look in your eyes and like tell them like their favorite thing about each other, whatever it was. You get that glow in their face and a light in their eyes.
Yeah.
And even when I was starting out, I did that. Like, I don't know where I learned this exactly, but I started doing it and I never looked back, because even when I wasn't as good at getting the lighting right, I got the expressions right. So I was always happy with the people in the shots. And then I had to get better at the technical side of things. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. I mean, and that sounds like a great way to get people what they want, and you've been very successful at it. So you've been getting these people headshots, and you're doing a lot of LinkedIn programs as well, right? You've been working on LinkedIn kind of
Yeah,
more than most people I know.
I do more portfolios, so they need pictures for their website, or some of my clients do have a lot of media presence, so magazines, and representing themselves at different conferences, or keynote speakers, or even book cover, and the front of the books and the author pictures, a lot of stuff. So all of these are
I
covered.
could never
Yeah.
imagine putting my own face on the front of a book. But
Well,
that's me as
one
a
client
photographer. I'm,
did.
I'm always behind the camera.
Me too. Yeah. I would prefer
Yeah.
that.
What are some other things you're working on LinkedIn? I know you're working on some other like writing projects on LinkedIn as well, right?
So the process of LinkedIn is again the same as Instagram. You have to constantly post, but LinkedIn is more of a professional networking site. So I write stories so that people can read and relate to. Because if you see someone else's picture, you may not be able to connect to your face, but if you read their stories, that how did their picture transform. So I always do before and after to show, and then write a whole content around that. That this is what their before was, this is what their expectation was, and I wanted, because their portfolio is of a leadership role, I want a certain expression to come. So we do a range of photos where they're folding their arms, or they're sitting together, they're leaning forward, they're reading a book, and all of that portfolio is created in like a whole session. So when I write about these experience of different people, I get a lot of leads from there. So my main source of lead is through LinkedIn itself, and
Okay.
it all comes organically. I never go to people and I say this is what I'm selling, but people come to me. It's just because they see my work, they see my portfolio, and people often come. In India, it's a new concept, so they say, oh, we never knew there's a specialty called headshot photographer. And I
I
would
mean, you
say,
you you proved that yourself. You didn't know.
I didn't know, yeah. And I was in HR for so long. So yeah, so when they see that someone is doing that as a specialist, it kind of favors me, because then if people look and search around, there are photographers who do a number of things and headshots,
Sure.
but I've been marketing myself only as the personal branding and headshot photographer, so I
Yeah.
have a leverage over others. So
Yeah.
that's what I do on LinkedIn with the posts.
I love the idea of adding story to your, not only your clients, but the experience you had with them, because I think one thing that's missing so much in the oversaturation of photos that we see on a regular basis is any pause and any look beyond seeing what we see and moving on to the next thing. So having a space where you can take time to write about it, and you can take time to read about it, and your clients can point their coworkers there to see how the process went. I think that digs deeper into almost like what you did with Black Label, where it was more about the experience, and it was meant to be about the experience. That's how we kind of sold it to people. We
Yeah,
said, even if you don't buy it, you're going to have a great experience. You're going to have a great time with your husband, your wife,
yeah.
and just, go enjoy yourself. And that was
My
meant to be what it was. Get comfortable, have a great time, have an experience, and then you buy the photos of that experience.
Yeah. So one of my client, I mean, he used to be a martial art guy, but he, because of injury, he stopped doing it. And when I mentioned his story in the post, he was so happy and surprised that I still remember to be able to mention his story in the post, and he was able to relate to it, and his friends and his colleagues were able to, value those pictures more, because it's not just the picture, but it's his story,
Yeah, it's
which
the
is
meaning behind them.
inspiring. Yes, it's meaning behind them.
So it
That
actually
kind of
sounds like
really
you're
helps.
you- you're taking the what I would mention before, like the podcast. You're doing it in writing form, and that's
Yeah,
that's amazing also. So you're still telling their story,
yeah.
and that's awesome. I think that's something we definitely lack. The photos lack depth sometimes, so I think having that experience and then conveying these people's story is a great way to kind of give those photos more meaning to them, and then to others who look at them.
I
Uh,
remember in your previous podcast you mentioned about displaying your picture in exhibitions or in cafes. Just the last podcast you mentioned,
yeah.
and I always miss that, because the kind of work I do, I could not put title to stories, but these stories, and title to the photos, but these stories that I put on LinkedIn, or if I make a note also, kind of gives some background to these pictures. So it's a little bit fulfilling from that perspective, but I wish I would be able to do more work where I can, summarize the picture from my perspective in one line, like a title to a picture, like
Sure.
it used to be.
Yeah. That both. Speaking of meaning and photos, you're working on a longer term project now, quite a very long term project. So I know you just said you marketed yourself as a headshot photographer, but you're also stepping outside of that comfort zone and doing something totally different. Can you talk a little bit about your current project?
Yeah, this project that I'm working is at a train station. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and if I'm not wrong, the only functional UNESCO World Heritage Site here in India.
Hmm.
And it was built in 1800s, and there's a lot of heritage structures as part of this train station, and there are new structures. So right now they're demolishing the non-heritage part and creating some new buildings and offices away, so that these offices can be moved and the heritage can be restored. And this entire project I'm documenting for a coffee table book, which will eventually take shape. So my work is just to document, and the idea behind the book is not to document the project from structural part, but any building or any structure is made for people and by people. So in my mind, whenever I photograph, the elements of people around is important, uh, because the story would be portrayed like that. So this is the project that I'm working on these days.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting because at a train station you get a variety of people,
Yeah.
people who are travelers, people who are workers, people who are beggars, people who are waiting for their train to come, and then it is also World Heritage Site, so you see a lot of tourists around, you know, and then they have a museum, and there is a tour around the station. So it's a great combination of so many things going on, and then the
Yeah.
construction workers are there, which is completely not part of a a mass of a station, but it's a whole work oriented stuff. So uh, then you get to go to the site and see the technological part, that this is what we are building, this is the beam, this is the support, and that's how we are going to build the columns, and now we are putting the bolts. So every single piece that they put has an importance to make an overall um, the site to be more important, and it's just the skeleton, and eventually they're going to hire designers who would do the interiors of it. So how beautifully the whole project will come out in a span of, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, I don't know, but yeah, it's a
So
great
you're
opportunity.
documenting the whole process from beginning
Yes,
to end.
from beginning and hopefully till the end.
Yeah, I find that that's actually pretty interesting what you said. It's like everybody is in a train station. It's very egalitarian. It kind of is a melting pot of the whole region because you have people from all walks of life going anywhere and everywhere, tourists, locals, and then you have these construction workers as well. And I think I've seen some of your photos from here, and I really like that you are conveying like you're elevating the construction worker in a way where most of the time we see somebody in a in an orange vest and a hard hat, and you look at them and then you look past them, and we see them often as a nuisance because that just means we have to go a different way, we have to take a different stairway, we our train's going to be delayed because they're working on something. But I like that you're highlighting them in the image to kind of like making them the focus of it. And I think we look at them, they're people. They're people at work. So I think, and they're the reason that all of these things around us exist. So I think that is an interesting part of the project as well. But what are you doing? What are you learning in this new realm of photography, like to be able to show the like the humanity of the train station, but also you're showing the bones of something that's going to grow into something bigger. Did you take any of your photo skills and interests from the beginning when you went out onto the streets of Mumbai and were interested in the architecture and the lighting? Are you bringing some of that back for your skills now?
So for now, because this project is in constant progression, I have to be on my toes to get anything and everything that is possible. So a new construction, a demolition, an old construction, and a mix of. So today itself, when I was there, one floor was being demolished, and right in front, in the composition, I can see the iconic dome of the building. So whenever they will showcase Mumbai, they would always showcase this train station, in any movie. So it's a very
Mhm.
iconic dome.
So I've probably seen it.
Yeah, probably.
I mean,
If you have seen any part of any clip around Mumbai. So so again, I'm trying to capture all of these essence and every moment that is passing through, how things are progressing. So there's a lot going on, and I think whatever I've learned so far is all being used here in terms of architecture and in terms of different sort of photography, because we always say the best time to take pictures is sunrise and sunset, but here but here I have to work during the daytime in harsh sun, and because people are working in that sunlight, you
yeah.
you can't isolate yourself and go only around sunrise and sunset. So
Well, I think it's interesting that you have to learn to take those photos, but also, I mean, sometimes with street photography, which is basically what this is in some ways, you have to showcase the light that it's in, and
yes,
being able to do that is a skill unto itself because we like shooting in sunset and sunrise because the light is soft, it's beautiful, it's nice, and to be fair, it is easier in some ways. Shooting in harsh light is very hard. So being able to, but it can be very useful as well. Let's say there's a big
to
ray of
create the
sunlight
mood.
coming
Yeah,
through. Exactly. Maybe there's somebody wheeling something through an area with slotted roofs, and you catch them when they're in the light. But then you have this nice like contrast between the very dark slats of light and the very bright section. So that brings a whole different mood to your photos. And you do often shoot in black and white as well, so you use that contrast of light. So you're using what you've learned, but what have you learned shooting on site here? Have you learned more about how to shoot photos in unusual light?
I have surprised myself shooting pictures in contrast lights. Uh, I didn't think that. I mean, of course, I am always critique of myself in such a way that I am not a photographer. I just do photography, but it has really helped me play around the light to show the contrast. And sometimes there was very low light, and I had to take pictures of these laborers and their hands, and these contrasts will show a lot of details of their hands working, or even when the laborers were working on the tracks in the harsh sunlight, and there were ladies who were wearing a sari, and then there's a shadow around with the sari on their face, so half of their face is smiling and half of the face is in shadow. So photos
Wow.
like these, it's very interesting to see. I keep myself surprising, I keep surprising myself doing these things, that oh, I did this.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think there's always a little bit of in anything, but I think there's always a bit of imposter syndrome in like a creative field where you look up to certain people who are photographers, let's say, and then you go, well, I'm not a photographer. I just do photography, like you just said. But you are a photographer. Like you, not only are you a professional photographer for many reasons, you've gotten paid for it. So by the technical definition, you are a professional photographer, but you also do amazing artistic work and you continue to push yourself and you are always learning. So I can't really think of what other definition you would be looking for in a photographer, but I do understand it's hard to embody that sometimes. But I think you have it. You're just not ready to say it with the confidence that you want yet. So let's try to get you there.
maybe it's also the compositions. When I start doing one sort of composition, and I discuss this with friends, you also mentioned that whether we should discuss this or not. And when I discuss it with you or other friends, and when I get their perspective that this composition could be better in this way, so I get to learn there too. So I'm having a real time uh, platform to learn and grow, and it's exponentially wide platform for me to learn photography at this stage, about
Yeah.
photographing diversity and prosperity at the same time.
Yeah, and I think you have all the elements for some really incredible photos, whether it be landscapes, structural
Yes,
portraits,
yes,
morning, day, night. And I've loved what I've seen so far. There's one specific one that I was thinking of where the guy's sitting on the cart of like
yeah,
kind of
I remember
bags.
the
Like I
first
love
one.
that photo. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do love that image. And but the images of like the people working have been really great coming out so far. So I'm excited to see what else you come up with at this
Yeah,
project.
and the site is so huge, and when I capture the people in the site, they are so minuscule, so the it, what is scale of the site shows in that. That's also very amazing for me. Again, I
Yeah.
said I surprise myself seeing that. But when you're walking on the site, you cannot imagine how big it is until you actually see the scale where a human being is walking, which is just a dot in that huge site over there. So I mean, of course, you see others' images and you cannot imagine, but when you see your own images and you were there, it's kind of it hits inside that.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I think being able to convey the feeling that you have when you're looking at something and the grand nature of something, being able to figure out a way to place a person there for scale and show your viewer what you're thinking and feeling and seeing. I think that's the real trick. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to show them what we see and what we see and what we feel.
I wish I had done this project before going to Antarctica, so I would have actually had more exposure on composition of these things also. Like last January, I was 22nd, I was in Antarctica. So I wish I had this exposure then. That would have helped me capture some more, interesting pictures with the scale of the landscape over there, and the small penguins and human beings and all comparative. It would have been great now that I can imagine.
So you think you learned a lot about a scale in and landscape in Antarctica?
I I saw a lot of things, but it was so um, how do I say, I can't get the word, but it was so overwhelmingly beautiful that sometimes I feel like my mind was zoned out, and I was kind of lost in that. So I was soaking it in rather than taking pictures, and some many times. Uh,
Yeah,
but if I was focusing, if I would go again, then I know I would be able to focus on a lot of things to see, because all of a sudden you get to a whole new landscape where there are whales and penguins and icebergs and mountains, like huge mountains, and the canals, and then there's another ship, and there are different kind of penguins. So, and then there are ice, there are rocks, there's so much to see, and then
yeah.
shapes and forms. It's like, it was beautiful, but then of course I think that I was able to capture very small part of the beauty that I was able to see there. And if I would love to return to capture them with a lot more experience, and uh, you know, able to see things differently now.
I think it is always a challenge to step into a new environment,
Yeah,
especially when it's an environment that you're interested in experiencing yourself and get the experience, but also do the work because you're taking in so much stimuli that it's hard to turn that off and go, okay, got to get to work. How am I going to make this? This glacier looks huge. We're only here for 5 minutes. What am I going to use to make this glacier look as big as it feels to me right now? Okay, there's a little ship in front of it. I think that's the perfect way. That's what I've done. I've tried to use those things for scale. Little boats that are
yeah,
really close to it that you think are huge, and then you see the scale of them next to this half mile
yeah,
tall glacier. The photos that you took that had these little penguins walking down their little penguin trails,
yeah,
and you still see so much of the landscape in the background. And you had a great one of the boat out off in the distance. I think when you were taking a Zodiac back to the ship or to the
yeah,
boat, and those were always really interesting to see the scale of the icebergs and the glaciers and the snow around you. So I think you did a great job, and I think I'm sure you'll bring that back to your work in Mumbai.
yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Speaking of those things, so working on ships, you went to Antarctica. You're traveling between Delhi and Mumbai for work right now. Uh, Seems like travel is a big part of your life and your work. So, is the travel like a driving force of your career and your work? Is it a perk or is it a burden? Is it kind of a mix of the three?
I think if travel would if I take out travel from my life, then my life would be very small. I think travel is a big part of my life, and that drives me to keep going, not just going on the go from one place to the other, but to you know, keep myself going, drive myself to do things and explore and meet people, and experience how life is, how people are. I didn't know when I did my first contract that how much the travel would change in me, and I still cannot quantify how much, but I know that what travel does to you, nothing else can teach you. So this
I agree.
is, and this is why I want to travel around the world for the rest of my life as much as possible. So if someone says you have a place anywhere in the world, I would go to that place and just experience. It's not about, of course money is important, but what the experience that you get doing that is phenomenal. It
Yeah,
close, yeah, money gives you the resource to fulfill your desires, but travel is like the food for soul.
couldn't say it better myself. That's very true. Yeah, and I think that drives your curiosity for the world and for life translates into your photography as well. So I think that all that's coming out in an amazing way.
So yeah, people say how much have you traveled, and when I say 50 three countries or so. It's just a number. But when you travel on cruise ship, it's mostly like an appetizer. You just go see, and you can say that, oh, I've ticked this country. But for me, travel experience is more the way you are doing or the way I'm doing here, where you stay there, you go for a walk, you see sunrise, you see sunsets, you see how dogs are there, you see how cafes are there, you see how people
Yeah.
live around, whether they socialize or not, whether they go like and have friends go have beer in the evening with in a cafe or in a pub, or how do they celebrate festivals, or how does the season change, how does the roads look when it is autumn or spring, and how does monsoon changes the whole landscape. All of these things is what I want to experience. And the cruise ship travel does give you an exposure that this is how the world is. I can point out the flags of different countries because I've traveled to so many countries, and I can locate them in the map, but it cannot be compared to the kind of experience that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I wish there was another metric we could use to measure experience in travel, because I think looking at the number of countries you've been to really doesn't mean anything. And
No.
let's say, for example, you've been to Shanghai or you've been to Miami. You've been to Seattle and Miami, which many people on cruise ships, those are the only two U.S. places they've ever been to, Fort Lauderdale and Seattle. Uh, have you been to the US?
No.
Because you saw the Ross in Seattle and the Ross in Fort Lauderdale? Uh, I don't think so.
No.
But I think a lot of our travel desires come down to the checklist of I've been to this many countries. You know, you'll see Instagram posts that are like, check off all the countries you've been to. But what does that really mean? Like, what was the experience you had when you were there? Have you been to Mexico, or have you been to an all inclusive resort in Cancun where you walked from the US owned hotel to the beach and back before you took the shuttles to the airport? Did you experience the people that were there, or just the other tourists that were there experiencing the same thing? I think quality of experience is better than quantity,
Yeah.
and it's hard to get that out of your mind because it is all like in my mind. I go, oh, I really want to go to this country and this country and this country. It's just because I want to experience more and I want to experience everything. But when I look at the map of the places I've been to, whatever number of countries I've been to, I think I've been to a lot of places. But then you see all the blank spots on the map, and like the world is so big,
It
you can't
is.
you can't experience everything. So with that knowledge that you can't see everything, is I think it's more important to see the things that you can in a way that's fulfilling,
Yeah.
and enjoy the moment, experience the moment, and
Yeah.
to learn what you can and take away from that.
Yeah, walk on the street and experience how shutters go down and up, or
Yeah.
how in see how the Spanish people play, celebrate siesta every day. Just go in the afternoon, close all the shops, and what
Yeah.
do? They just go and rest. They spend time with their family. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think
it's
getting that
different.
those cultural experiences and those little things will stick with you, the way that a language sounds, or the way that you hear the call to prayer at the end of the day in Muslim countries, and like things that like that just you see the light on these like clay buildings and the sea to the other side. Like these little things that I'm thinking of, just they stick with me more than the big things, like that you do on the checklist of a tourist. So I think we're both on the same page there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or just go for a walk hand in hand with your loved ones and enjoy.
Okay, we're back, and we've gotten a lot about your past and your history and your skills. Um, in those skills, I found that I've had to learn many lessons multiple times, and I have to continue reminding myself to do certain things that I should have learned by now, or that I know internally, but I still have to like talk myself into doing the things that I know are good for me and I know are things that I'll enjoy. So, are there any lessons that you've learned that you've had to learn multiple times over, or that you have to keep on teaching yourself?
Yeah, I keep teaching myself to keep going on and try different things. So I never stick to one play thing because then I start getting bored. So to keep myself engaged in something or the other, like recently I did a hike to It's a place called Chandrashila, which is 12,000 feet. And that was like one thing that was driving me to stay fit and at the same time trying something new. This was my first time where I did camping and hiking all together. And uh, then I started learning sailing because I'm in Mumbai and there's a lot of sailing stuff over here. So and I'm learning to sail, which is great. It's fun going back to the sea because I miss sea so much. And it helps me keep going to keep myself refreshed, not going with the flow. It's like when you do the same thing over and over again, it's like office. You go to the office, do the job, come back. There is no life. To keep my life interesting, I keep pushing myself, doing something or the other to be able to break the monotony and learn and of course gain something different around. So this is what I think I've learned.
Okay, that's great. Do you have any systems that you use in your life to make your process easier? Like, for example, if I'm writing a story, I'll put out like cards and I'll storyboard it. Do you have any processes in your photography or your writing that you use to kind of make your life easier to remember things?
For me, mostly things are very impromptu, and the more I exercise, the more I get it too. So documentation is not part of my work. So if I have to write a post, I will sit in the morning, take a look at a picture, pick a picture. That's the process. I'll pick a picture and write whatever comes to me and then refine it. So it's impromptu.
Okay.
Similarly, when I have to meet a client, every client is different, so how I pitch to them is different. So if I go for a meeting, I dress up based on what client I'm meeting. So it's all impromptu and it's very much with the flow. And but I think that's the way I consistently do it. That I prepare impromptu. It's all in my head and it just goes with the flow the way I feel. I'm more of a feeling person rather than strategic and planning and making lists and stuff.
Okay.
Nowadays, when I wake up in the morning, I spend some time staying quiet, don't pick up my phone, nothing for 15-20 minutes. Then I probably browse through my phone if there's anything, and then I read at least for half an hour. And if I feel like writing something, maybe journal or something, I'll write that. And then I start my day. Like then I step out of the bed. So that kind of helps me get into the rhythm slowly. And and it feels like I've done already a couple of things because I've spent time with myself, I've read a little, I've seen and responded to some messages. And then before retiring at night, I would write a post, and then in the morning I'll just refine and post it. So this rhythm is kind of very helpful. And I recently did a meditation program which helped me get more clarity and refinement and make my head more sharp. And and once I'm going in the flow with these things, the day looks very productive and aligned, so I don't feel like I'm falling for things are missing on things because it's 8:30 right now and I still have time to do a lot of stuff. I had my dinner at 5. So everything is sorted and I still have time from 9 to 12 to do a lot of more productive things for the rest of the day.
Okay. That's great. I mean, it sounds like you have a good system for starting your days. I think that that could be very useful for a lot of people to start a little more slowly instead of ramping directly into looking at
Yeah.
your phone and then feeling like you have to rush to get ready. So
Yeah.
so that's nice. I like that a lot. What kind of things would you do if you need to get out of a rut? If you feel like you're in a rut of like writer's block, photographer's block, whatever you want to call it. What do you use to inspire yourself to get out there and do something different?
When I feel like I'm stuck, I just leave it there and take a break and then come back to it. When I'm stuck, then no idea comes. So I have to leave it there so that I can come with fresh mind. So when I'm in Mumbai, I'll just go walk by the sea, get some fresh air, sit, reflect, see people, see sounds, and I observe things. And then when I come back, I always have something to start again. So it,
Yeah.
it helps to rewind. you need to step back to step forward, I would say.
Oh, I like that. Nice. That's great. And on that same topic, are there any artists, whether it be visual artists, musical artists, or film, TV, anything that inspires you when you need it, like when you want to look at somebody else's work and say, that inspires me and makes me want to do better, learn more, etc. Anything that's like currently really interesting you, making your hair stand up on end and very inspiring to you.
I like going to museums and see work of different artists, and that's quite inspiring. It just gives it just breaks my pattern because I see new things, and then I'm able to recreate something new myself.
Hmm. Yeah, I do the same thing. I love that. I get it. It takes me out of what I'm normally looking at because I don't do visual arts in that way. I don't do paint. I don't paint or sculpt. But I'm always looking at things. I like looking at paintings and seeing how the light is represented.
Yes.
And how they're, especially like sea paintings, the way that waves are represented, I think is super super interesting. And like the paintings of, let's say, like Monet,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or Seurat, where they use pointillism, and you look at every individual dot. It's almost like looking at pixels in a way where you go, okay, well, those, you just see how the color shifts slightly to make the shadow on something. And it's just really amazing to see how much detail and how much focus they had on these minute light paintings, and I really get excited about that kind of thing. And I don't know how that exactly translates to my own work, but it does make me want to be more detail oriented, and it also just kind of gets that spark going in my mind and makes me want to go out there and create something as amazing as I see in the museum.
Yeah, and that reminds me, remember I started with when I started doing photography, I stopped looking at others' photos because that was really putting me in a situation, uncomfortable situation. And it's quite opposite that now, rather than looking at the photos, even paintings or photos now inspire me to do different. So there's a huge transformation from me when I started as like photography as a hobby till now when I see others pictures and that inspires me. So that
Yeah,
answers like the whole transformation of starting to where I am today. It's
yeah.
interesting. I just
It is.
reflected that.
um, and So, if you could do anything right now, like, we talked a little bit about you starting in engineering and HR and going into photography, but if you could do anything, if there was nothing holding you back, what would you be doing right now? And is there anything that you think is keeping you from doing that?
I'm a person who would do what I want to do when I want to do. The only thing that holds me is the process or like for instance, I want to work as a crew member in Antarctica, going to these polar regions. The only thing that is holding me is the regulations because I have to comply by their requirements. So I'm trying to work out and see where I can become, or if I want to become a guide, I would love to work with you because you're so good at finding places, and so maybe we can start a travel agency and start looking at finding destinations for people. So something like that where I can offer stuff to people that and so that is one thing that I really want to do. It's not stopping me, but I'm in the process of getting there to find a way. And the second thing is I want to do long term projects of photography where I document a specific theme. One of the theme is capturing different cities around the river, the longest river in India, the Ganges. And then there's
Hmm.
another theme which is located in London, which I want to work on. But then it's a long process, and I have to gather a lot of detail. But of course, you have to be patient enough to step by step go towards these assignments that you want to do.
Yeah, I mean those sound like really interesting projects. I think there's a lot of logistics involved with capturing both of those projects.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, and of course, working in Antarctica would be an amazing job.
of course.
So you don't have to pay to travel. You can you can go there multiple times, and you'll still be able to see and practice all your photography skills in those. big scales of mountains, and
Yeah,
even
I think you'd
Greenland or Iceland or Norway, any of these places.
yeah, I think if you would definitely get to exercise those muscles of shooting in different conditions, and especially in Antarctica where conditions are volatile and unpredictable, and you'd have the chance to go back to the same place in different conditions to be able to shoot it the way that you want. And I think you could get some really interesting images that way. That's really cool.
Yeah,
Sounds like you have a lot on your mind, a lot to look forward to coming up. So I want to thank you for taking the time to chat today. Could we tell everybody where they could find your work if they want to see what you're doing?
I'm on Instagram, and my handle is headshots by Basundhara, with the letter B, and and I'm also on LinkedIn. You can just search headshot photographer in India. Possibly you'll find my name with on LinkedIn. And I have a website which is called Portraits by Basundhara, which has a brief portfolio of my work that I mostly offer in the corporate domain. So far, it's just limited to this, but I do plan on selling on some of my pictures online eventually, which I have taken at different the landscape photos and the ideas and the stories that I've built in my mind. But it's still in progress, so wait for it.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all those links down below so people can find you, and we'll tag you. And well, thanks so much. I'm inspired to go do some more projects, some more photography after talking to you. So thank you so much, Basundra. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It was
Thank you.
great. It was like one of the things I wanted to do.
Right, you
to,
can check that off the list now.
to be in your podcast. So yeah, it's done.
Well, I think it's going to be great. So I think everybody's going to like that. Thanks everybody else for being here as well. Go out there, be curious, be kind, and be creative. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.